morning to our viewers. My name is Will Fennell, and it's my distinct pleasure this morning to interview Surgeon Rear Admiral Frank Golden, who this evening will be awarded the Distinguished Medical Alumnus Award for 2012 from University College Cork. Frank Golden graduated from UCC in 1960 and initially pursued general practice training in London before joining the Royal Navy as a surgeon lieutenant in 1963 and retiring in 1993 as Surgeon Rear Admiral. Frank is being awarded the UCC Distinguished Medical Alumnus Award because of his major contribution to improving our understanding of the physiological response to cold water immersion. This has very significantly impacted on the management of victims of cold immersion, whether they are being threatened by hypothermia or drowning. Frank, you have a stellar CV, and I note you have had over 70 publications, including editorials, editor review requests in scientific and medical literature. You have been an expert advisor for medical training films and TV programmes and a guest expert on BBC, ITV and the Discovery Channel. You have served as consultant advisor to the Medical Director General Navy in Applied Physiology, Director of Naval Medical Research, and you were a Fleet Medical Officer to the Commander-in-Chief Fleet. You have been a member of many United Kingdom government delegations. You have been Honorary Consultant to the Department of Trade, Maritime Division, and Honorary Consultant for the Department of Energy. You have been a member of the Medical Commission on Accident Prevention in Hypothermia. You've been Honorary Lecturer in Environmental Physiology at the Universities of Leeds, Sheffield and Portsmouth. In 1981, you were awarded the OBE and also the Gilbert Blaine Medal of the Royal College of Surgeons in London. In 1982, you became an Honorary Fellow of the Nautical Institute, and from 1990 to 93, you were a Queen's Honorary Physician. In 1994, you received the Laerdal Award and gave the Laerdal Lecture. Frank, this is a truly remarkable list of achievements over your working lifetime. I would like to start by asking you, what were your outstanding memories of your time in UCC? Your colleagues remember you as Gully, a good student and a good rugby player.
Well, the transition from a schoolboy who really struggled, and I was very dyslexic, so that didn't help. And I was quite a revolutionary in a way, and the more a teacher tried to force me to do my homework, the more determined I became not to. So I didn't really leave school with any sort of a fantastic CV, but I loved coming into the environment of the UCC, where nobody cared whether you did it. It's entirely up to you. And I liked that environment, and therefore I was able to work and study for the first time in my life. And I remember my first day at UCC, there was Professor O'Rourke, Professor of Physiology, who was the Dean of Medicine at the time. Yes. And I remember we went into the class and he said, in the lecture theatre, and he said, I want you to look to your right and I want you to look at the person on your left. Now, one of the three of you is going to qualify. And I looked at the guy to my right, and there was a guy called Barry Keane, who has since been made an alumni. And I looked on my left, and there was a chap called John Kennevick, who was, very good at school and was going to be a surgeon and was a surgeon, very eminent surgeon. And I thought, I bet they're feeling smug. They're looking at me and saying, well, that's 50-50 out of the way. I just worry about the guy on the other side. In fact, all three of us got through. But I loved my time as a student, and it was great fun.
No, I recall Barry Keane because he is one of our outstanding alumni, and has had a chair in Harvard for many years, and he is a world figure in paediatric cardiology. Yes. So that was a great trio. Yeah. How did you decide to enter the world of applied physiology? Was it by choice or serendipity?
Well, I think it was serendipity, definitely, because I hated physiology as a student. In fact, I failed my first ME in physiology. I had to resit in the autumn, which was, in retrospect, the best thing that happened, because I had to learn physiology then during the summer, and I got very comfortable with it after that. But when I joined the Navy, I was just an ordinary sort of GP, and one of my early postings was a naval air station at Caldrose in Cornwall, right down the Lizard. And they used to do a lot of air sea rescue from there. Not the big air sea rescue helicopters you have now, the little small ones, sometimes who struggle to even get airborne. But however, we used to go out and pick people out of the sea, or sometimes go to casualties on French trawlers or British trawlers, or bring people in. And on a number of occasions, I couldn't help but note that people were clearly alive in the water before the rescue strop was put around them, but were dead when they got back into the helicopter. Not in my case, not very often, but anecdotally from talking to the air crews, they used to see it quite frequently. And this just makes sense to me, you know, because up to then, when you were in the water, you either drowned or you died from hypothermia.
Yes.
Now, if you look at somebody who's alive, head out of the water, and a few minutes later he's dead, that doesn't actually fit in with hypothermia or with drowning. Yes. So there was clearly something else happening. Okay. And that brought me into the literature, which I looked at to see. And during the war, for the first time, I didn't know this before because I hadn't read that literature. During the war, this question of what they used to call post-rescue collapse was quite a common thing. And in fact, the German air sea rescue people, who were far better advanced and more efficient than the British or the Americans were at that stage, they noted this was a major phenomenon for them, and they were trying to find the answer, regrettably, in one of the Dachau immersion experiments were done to try and find that problem. But in our case, I was unhappy, and I did some experiments on ourselves to try and learn more about what was happening physiologically in that period immediately after coming out of the water and later on. And it was people attributed to a continued fall in deep body temperature while you were out of the water. In other words, that the tissues were still cold, and the warm blood perfusing out into the tissues when it was returning cold, and that's what kept the temperature falling after you came out, and perhaps brought back some adverse electrolytes and things from the outside.
Now, you have contributed enormously to improving our understanding of the body's response to cold water immersion, and as a result you have improved the chances of survival of victims who are at risk of drowning. This is a remarkable legacy, and probably a more important contribution than one could ever hope to make as a bedside clinician.
Right, well,
I
don't know.
All right, thank you. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions about your cold water experiments. Did you become immersed in cold water yourself as a volunteer?
Oh, definitely. You know, in those days you didn't have ethical committees like you have now.
Yes.
In those days you were your own ethical committee. If you got in, you tried it, you thought it was tolerable, you could then ask other people to help. Yes. But you had to do it yourself first on all these things. Okay.
So what are your memories of these experiments? Did you just feel cold or did you shiver?
No, not just being cold, bloody cold, and shivering like mad. Yes. And the shivering was unbelievable. I've never had shivered like that before in my life, and you get so tired.
And then does there come a time when you just don't care what happens, or do you just become paralyzed with muscle weakness?
Well, you get progressively colder, and at that stage you don't care. Yes. And in fact, you even almost stop thinking. Yeah. You know, earlier on you think, well, when will my temperature reach that limit where they'll pull me out? And you think, will it ever come? And then after a while, you don't seem to care. I was
going to ask you my next question. Is there a euphoric experience? It's not really euphoric then, it's just you don't care.
Well, I never heard. I mean, there was a guy called Glaser who worked in Cambridge, and he described this euphoric thing. And he said if you could shut your eyes and imagine you're in a tropical pool, you sort of confuse the temperature sensors of the skin, and you could convince yourself you're warm. Okay. Well, when I was shivering non-stop, I never convinced myself I was warm. Okay. But you just lose interest. Yeah. And how did you find the experience of working as part of a great team? Oh, fantastic! I mean, the team were our own team. I didn't have any. I wasn't working in a well-known laboratory. I was working in a swimming pool that had a cooling facility at the back of hadn't been used since the war, and my team consisted of a chief petty officer, electrician, aircraft electrician, and an ordinary able seaman, and that was our team. And we had to build up our equipment and train these people what to do, so they became, if you like, official tech labs, lab techs, and it was great. And
did your rugby experience give you an advantage in the world of teamwork?
I think so. I think it was again, it's the same business. You know, you don't ask anybody in rugby to do anything you don't, and you actually show them how to do it. You get stuck in first yourself, and the same. That's the same. And the sailors, I think, appreciate that. You know, you're not an officer standing back saying, "Boy, do this and do that." You get stuck in, and they'll come with you.
Excellent. Yeah. Now, I have listed many aspects of your stellar CV in my introduction, but I note as the Queen's honorary physician stood out. Did this mean that you got to meet the Queen in the palace or with afternoon tea, or did she come and meet you in the officers' mess?
No, no. Well, I did meet the Queen, obviously, but it is the requirement for QHP is really not to look after the Queen when she's sick. She has got proper doctors to do that. No, you're there so that you go attending the investitures of the palace or the garden parties and these things, and you're hanging around like a St. John's Ambulance man, and you sort of get dug in. So I was, I think at the palace, there was one incident, my first incident at the palace, and I was very nervous going. I arrived very early and I was checking that the oxygen bottles were all full and the resuscitation stuff. And then I walked around the area and I said, now, if somebody collapses there, how am I going to get out the door to get there? And, you know, this organisational, I think my methodology, getting it going in advance. And so that's done as much as I could. And just before I finished, this retired general came around and he said, Doc, he said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just checking out the procedures that if somebody collapsed here. He said, oh, for God's sake. He said, I've been doing these things for 20 years. I've never seen anybody collapse. You know, just enjoy the day. So I said, very well. So it started, excuse me, and I was in the back of the hall of the ballroom, in fact, in Buckingham Palace. And the Queen then came in and she stood on the sort of little slightly elevated stage in front. And behind her were two yeomans of the guard, you know, from the Tower with all the red and the big and the pikes, right, a little hatchet thing at the end of the pike, and they stood behind her, one on her left and one on her right, and she was beginning to print. And within about the third or fourth recipient of a knighthood, I think, in this case, she was just going to whack him with the sword, and this yeoman of the guard on her right had a wobbly and fell, and the pike fell right across, just missed the Queen's shoulder. And so we got him out and sorted out. So afterwards, when I then had to go back in and meet her, and we had a chat. We spoke for about 20 minutes or so. She was lovely. I mean, the only problem was she's quite small, as you know, and I was
You're quite tall.
6'4". So I mean, I'm all the time looking down, trying to talk to her, and trying to stoop without obsessively stooping. And she, because she stands for 140 minutes. She was on the, or 1 hour 40 minutes. Sorry, she was presenting the medals, and she was in the same position all the time. And when she gets off, to avoid getting cramp, she sort of moves around. Yes. So when you're trying to have a conversation with your sovereign for the first time, and there she is jumping around in front of you, it's a bit disconcerting. But she was lovely. She was absolutely lovely.
Great. Now, one of the most important developments in UCC in recent days, and this year in fact, has been the bringing of the Naval Service in Haulbowline into the UCC family, and a diploma in military medicine is now on the curriculum. Right. This must be a source of great satisfaction to you, knowing the great historical connection between the Royal Navy and Cork Harbour.
Well, I was very, very surprised to hear about this diploma, and I'm very glad. I think it's long due, because Cork really traditionally, as you know, historically, had a major role with the Royal Navy in those days, and it's very famous, and it's nice to see that this facility has been developed here, and I would like to see it get more involved, because Cork should be involved internationally in naval tradition.
Yeah. Now, I know you have visited Haulbowline in recent years, and you presented your research findings there, and I would like to suggest that you've shown them the way, and maybe further fundamental important research will continue your work.
Right.
For those who would like to read more about Frank's life experience and contributions, I will refer you back to his memorable article in the Medical Alumni newsletter in 2010 entitled Memories of an Applied Physiologist, and this is online. Now, before I finish, I should also mention that Frank played rugby for Cornwall. He captained UCC to win the Cork Charity Cup, and my research associate, his classmate Paddy Kiley, told me that he did a tour of duty on HMS Jaguar on an official goodwill tour. Do you remember anything of that tour, or is there anything that you would like to share with us?
Oh, it was a holiday. I had been working as a GP I had only just joined the Navy, and I was put straight into the ship, and I was a real green lad from Ireland. And traditionally in the Navy, the medical officer is one of his accessory jobs, because he has more spare time to do these odds and ends jobs around the ship. Traditionally in the Navy, the medical officer is made the wine caterer. you know, because he's, of course, again, historically, perhaps the guy, university educated, and comes in and understands from all the dining in Cambridge and Oxford and these places, understands good wine from bad wine. So, but the only wine I knew was black with a white top. So I wasn't exactly the best connoisseur. But I mean, there were these things. There were lovely things happened. It was like a holiday paid for by the taxpayer. You know, it was lovely.
Great. Well, Frank, I'd like to thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed for the UCC television network, and hopefully this will provide an important record of your contributions, of which we are all proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Phil. Very nice.
Frank, thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, great.